Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShanaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm excited to be here today to talk about purpose, which is something that it's a deep topic when you really get into it. You know, not just choosing the work you do in the world because that's what you studied in school or that's what you were taught or your family expected of you, but actually relating to what you're doing in the world, to your work and to the way that you live from a place of a deep calling. So I have an amazing guest and expert today here, Jonathan Gustin. Jonathan, welcome.
Thanks so much. It's nice to be invited. I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I am excited to talk to you about this. So for those of you who don't know Jonathan, let me give a quick intro as usual, and then we'll dive in. So Jonathan is a purpose guide, psychotherapist, meditation teacher, and integral mentor in private practice in the Bay Area for over 20 years. And he's the founder and lead teacher of the Purpose Guide Institute, Integral Awakening Center, and Green Sangha. He teaches purpose discovery at San Quentin Prison, which I think is amazing and fascinating, and also serves as an adjunct faculty at John F. Kennedy University. Jonathan is a contributing editor to the book anthology Purpose Rising and has taught at the California Institute of Integral Studies, Kaiser Permanente, Green Gulch, Spirit Rock. I mean, you've been pretty much everywhere if I keep going with the list. And, you know, you've really co-taught with human potential pioneers, George Leonard, Buddhist activist Joanna Macy, depth psychologist Bill Plotkin. So you really... You're doing the deep work with the masters, I would say, you know, and as a master yourself, it really putting together a very thorough, understanding of what purpose is, where it comes from, how we know it, how we tap into it. So thank you so much for being here to talk about this.
You're welcome. I don't know that I'll live up to that very generous introduction, but I will do my best to offer what I can.
Yeah, well, let's start with one of the things that you wrote in the article I read was that purpose denotes your soul's deep calling, the place to which you belong, and your primary reason for incarnating. So if you were to start there and help us understand, you know, how you see purpose, what it is, how we get to find it, where do you want to begin?
Sure. Well, I think maybe the way to begin is the question of identity. And most of us exist in what I would call this whole world of personality and ego. And this cosmology I'm going to unfold in a moment. I would call this the middle world. Yeah. And it's a beautiful place. And the purpose there, I think, is to be an emotional adult, which is not an easy thing to do, to really be able to give and receive love without any unnecessary impediment. And of course, we bring impediments up more often than we care to admit. I want love more than anything from my wife, and sometimes I defend against it. It's odd, isn't it?
It is. It's odd, and it totally makes sense, right, from a psychological perspective. But
yes,
right. And okay, so this is the middle world you're saying, and the middle world includes love and just kind of our daily living and family and those kinds of things?
That's right. So to be an emotional adult, as I call it, is to be able to give and receive love without any unnecessary impediment, to also be able to rest or abide in equanimity without selling our peace out too cheaply. We know we can do this if someone cuts us off on the road or there's traffic. And there's certainly, you know, if my kid, I have a 9-year-old, and if he was rushed to the emergency room, you know, my peace would be disturbed. I
Yes.
watch the news and my peace is disturbed. And
Yeah.
this is understandable and probably good, but we sell it out kind of too easily. So that's another hallmark, is resting as and in equanimity.
Wow.
And there are more hallmarks, but generally the whole middle world is first safety and security, as Maslow's hierarchy teaches us.
Mm-hmm.
The sense of belonging to just people whom we have some affiliation with.
Yeah.
They care about us, we care about them, and our esteem needs are taken care of to a degree that we can esteem ourselves and receive esteem from others.
Right.
Then,
And this takes up, for many, many people, this takes up all of our life, right? It's like, this is where we are and what we focus on. And some people don't even necessarily recognize there's anything more than this.
that's right. Yeah. And that's why I think Maslow's top of the pyramid is so important. He put forth this idea of self-actualization, that after our basic needs are met. And that doesn't mean completely, but adequately.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think I'll come to a point where my everyday, you know, garden variety neurotic ego will feel completely, you know, at rest. And
Yes.
I don't want to invest another $50,000 in psychotherapy in another 50 years if I live to be 101.
Yes.
It's enough. But simultaneously, there's another calling. And so this gets us to the realm of soul. Actually, I think there's a broad calling called the spiritual ache and impulse. And there's an upper world dimension and a lower world dimension. And the upper world is associated with transcendence and the enlightenment, the classical enlightenment or traditional enlightenment associated with a sage like the Buddha. And that's the experience of so-called non-duality.
Right. Waking up. And often this happens through spiritual practice and meditation and right in this upper realm.
Exactly. When we meditate, we're like steeping in the stillness and silence, like a tea bag in the crystal clear water of awareness itself. And eventually we can experience the edges of the self sense. Yeah. The separate self sense begin to soften and dissolve. Yes. And what's left is this open, empty, luminous awareness, which is what you are at essence. And
I love that this isn't even what we're talking about today, but I love that you're going here. And, you know, that again, like this is highlighting something that I think, you know, some men may not even think about or put time and energy into. And yet this is also another possibility, right? Another way to live with spirit or soul.
Precisely. So, you know, if you study a guy like Ken Wilber, he talks about lines of development, right? And so, you know, one of the lines of development is we want to be a good provider, right? Another one is we want to just have joy. We want to enjoy our life. We want to flourish. We want to have abundance. So these are all things that are very interesting to me. All right. I want to be able to pay my mortgage. I want to be able to go to restaurants and take my kids at a camp now and it's expensive. I want to pay for that. So there's a need and a longing there. And it's a legitimate aim of life to explore that. The thing is, though, there is not enough money in the world to fill up a soul or spirit shaped hole. It doesn't work. Yeah. We read the stories of billionaires and the next thing they're up to is sometimes, not always, you know, wanting to earn the second billion. And it's a never ending thing because there is this impulse towards the infinite. Yeah. And if you don't have a cosmology that includes spirit and soul, then the infinite is going to be superimposed on ego materiality. And then you'll chase things like fame and money and success. And again, these things aren't unwholesome in and of themselves, but if they're used as a replacement for something that is deeper and more essential, a person will find you can't get enough fame, money.
Right. And I would imagine this leads perfectly right into the soul's calling, because these are things that are kind of a surface level attempting or imposters to try to fill this deep calling.
That's right. So although we are usually situated in our ego and personality, it's actually not the only dimension of our unique identity. There is, you might call it a partner, soul. And she, he, it, Jung called it the animus, right? Sort of a female counterpart to a man, or a anima, or animus for a woman. And this is a partner that you've had since you were born. In
And
some
just to be clear,
cosmologies.
this is within you. This is as you, right? For those listening who are kind of imagining, oh, this is a
Sure.
partner outside of myself, right? This is within self.
No, this is the original soulmate.
Yes.
And all other soulmates are a chip off of this block. And it's very dangerous. I did this when I was in college. I before I really understood as much as I do now about soul, which is to say still just very little, because soul is so elusive and mysterious.
Yes.
But that said, when I met someone who I felt like was a soulmate, I pushed all soul chips onto this woman. And she
Many
left.
of us do.
She left after a year. She said, I love you and I'm leaving. And I'm like, well, how can you leave if you're in love?
Yeah.
Well, it's just, I'm called to move on. And so I thought I had lost soul itself. I thought I had lost my hookup to this depth dimension of me. But it's not a person. Although I'm incredibly attached to my wife. We've been together for 21 years. And if she left or died, I would be, heartbroken.
Yes.
But I get now that there is for me, another feminine radiance in the world, non-human, that has been with me my whole life, that is calling me, that is a partner to me. And it's best that I invest, like any relationship. I'm a couples counselor amongst other things. And one of the things I do is like, well, if you want to grow your relationship, you should probably spend more time with your spouse.
Yeah.
And so if you want to grow your relationship with soul, you should probably spend more time, have more date nights with
your soul. And I think I just want to clarify for those men who are listening who, don't necessarily come from a spiritual background, right? This talk of purpose and your soul's calling, you may not ever relate to it as another feminine presence or, some way that you feel it in yourself, but you may have a sense of there's another part of me that's deeper than my, surface level day, or, when as we start to get into purpose, right, you may feel this calling that you're going to talk about more, and it may not live the same way for our listeners as it does in you.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm overtly spiritual. So I'm out about that. My cosmology, and everyone has one, even if you're a materialist, a scientist, or anything, we all have a cosmology we see the world through. And so I don't want anyone to drink this Kool-Aid, but to understand it, that there's three broad worlds of human awakening.
Yes.
One is to be an emotional adult. Two is, if you feel called to it, the classical enlightenment of, say, the Buddha. And then the third is this descent, this burrowing down into your depths to what you are uniquely, but not at the level of personality. Like at the level of personality, I love skiing, I love organic ice cream, I love live jazz. Okay. So, but that's not my soul's purpose, is to eat organic ice cream, ski, and listen to live jazz. Those things bring me alive.
What would you say your soul's purpose is?
To midwife wholeness. When I was 20, I was doing a meditation retreat, more of an upper world, more of a transcendent, non-dual experience. But I was contemplating my future, and I heard I received an image, and the image was whole person midwifery. And I knew I wasn't interested in traditional midwifery. I wasn't going to catch babies. This isn't about
baby catching.
Yeah. Nope. Nothing against that. It's just not my destiny.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my goodness, that's my name. It's called the mythopoetic identity. That poetic, imagistic. It's like your purpose often will speak to you not in words, not in a particular vocation, but in a kind of poetic way. So on my business card, it doesn't say whole person midwife.
Right.
Tofu and incense and bliss ninny, hippy dippy. On my business card, it says meditation teacher, purpose guide, psychotherapist.
Right.
But those aren't my purpose. Those are delivery vehicles for my soul's purpose.
Right. Which
Wherever I
actually, right,
am.
this is kind of foreshadowing the 8 facets of purpose that
That's right.
you've delineated.
Yeah. So I think of soul as an organ of perception. It's
Uh-huh.
another way of feeling or experiencing the world. And
Yes.
mostly we think our way through life
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
the cerebral cortex is just an amazing evolutionary invention.
Yeah.
And we've only been around for 40,000 years, and we're
Right.
still kind of getting used to the technology.
Yeah. So, okay. So if we're going to put soul in relation to purpose here, right? And you said you found your purpose or your calling, you're at a meditation retreat and it kind of came in, or you got a download of this is what I'm supposed to do. Is that right?
Yep.
And so, as we're talking about purpose and someone's kind of deeper calling in the world, I'm tempted to go here, but you tell me if there's more that you want to cover first, right?
Mhm.
Which is like, okay, how does someone even know that they have a purpose or hear their purpose or find that calling?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great question. Well, it's important to realize we don't live in a soul infused society. The
Mm-hmm.
best we can get, my parents, I came from a good family. It wasn't, there was no real hardship in it. The best they could come up with is what my grandparents came up with. They
Right.
said, Jonathan, what do you want to be when you grow up? And
Yes.
what they meant was, how do you want to earn your living?
Uh-huh.
And that's not a bad question because, lo and behold, turned 18, or actually after college, it turned out I had to make my own living. So
Well,
it's
no, this is
a good
great. This is like
question.
exactly how most of us hear it, right? What do you want to do when you grow up? How do you want to make your living? And
Yeah.
then that's
But
it.
but that's just the survival dance.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the sacred dance, right? So I say to my son, um, try to find work that if you won the lottery, you would still want to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm under the impression, I haven't won the lottery, so it's a thought experiment, but I'm under the impression if I played the lottery, won $100 million, that I would probably do the exact same thing,
Uh-huh.
which is confirmation through the thought experiment that I am occupying the niche in the habitat of life that I was meant to occupy.
Right. Okay. So if you're doing something in the world, you're creating something in the world, your career, if you would do it anyway, not for the money, then you're in that realm of, okay, this is a calling, this is a purpose.
That's right. And a
Mhm.
calling or destiny, you don't do it for the money. Now, I'm in a lucky position. I do, as I said, I haven't won the lottery. So my sacred dance of midwifing wholeness, of bringing people to purpose discovery and purpose embodiment, and my survival dance are the same thing. So
Yes.
I go to work and I love the work. Not every moment, sometimes the marketing gets to me and so forth.
Right.
But
No, but I get that. I feel similarly, right? Like my
yeah,
purpose and my work in the world is also how I make money. And I think we're really fortunate. I don't think a lot of people get
yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think some people don't even conceive that it's possible.
Possible. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So we're lucky, and perhaps many of the listeners would resonate with this. We're amongst some of the most lucky people to ever be born.
Mm.
You are the idea of rich. I think the definition is people who are rich are those who are richer than us.
Hmm.
Well, it takes $34,000 on the planet to be in the 1%.
Wow.
So for the listeners who are in 34,000 or more, you are the 1%. Now, granted, earning 34,000 in San Francisco is different than
Will not get you
34,000
very
in
far.
Bhutan. So it's not quite apples to oranges, but still, just go with me here.
Yeah.
So after you've got basic security down, then there's the question, is there more to life than
Mm-hmm.
just joy and pleasure? And I'm all for the fun bucket. Fill it up every day. Have a good time in life.
Yeah.
But there's also something deeper, and that is this descent to soul. And you discover, where do I belong? What is my place? And everything, a rock, a tree, a flower, has a unique niche or niche in the habitat of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bill
And again,
Plotnick.
I'm thinking for those men who don't identify as spiritual,
Mhm.
like I get dissent. For some of them, it may seem like a clarification or a sense of like an aha, right? Of, oh, this is what I'm called to. This is what's really important to me. This is what matters to me. things like that, I'm imagining it might show up or start to show up as.
Yes, because in our everyday, in our minds, in our egos, we can say all sorts of things are important to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what's important at a depth level?
Yeah.
What's important? So is where's this sort of the spirituality of transcendence to heaven or nirvana or enlightenment can feel like kind of an up and out. This is when I say descent, I mean from your mind down into your gut, into your intuition, into your.
I like that too, right? It's another way to look at it. It's not like descent into hell or whatever some people's images might be, right? It's like actually going deep into yourself and your core and your gut into,
Yeah. The descent has been pathologized because with the ascendance of, upper world spirituality, Christianity, Judaism, and Buddhism, there's this idea that you want to kind of get out of ego personality to the Godhead, to great history. But there's another direction of spirituality inside, in a person's, torso, in their belly. Like what pulls you from your gut? And that's what I mean in part by soul. And it's a place of imagination. It's not, I wouldn't have sat there and worked out, I think I want to be a whole person midwife.
Yeah.
It came to me. And so we'd actually discover our purpose as opposed to create it.
In the article I read, you used Martin Luther King as an example, right, of the different, you have these 8 facets of purpose. I don't know how deeply we want to go into those today, but some of those I think help really clarify, like you said, we can have a vision, right? Or you have this sense of, okay, I'm going to midwife wholeness. And yet when you talk to people in the world in certain realms, you're not necessarily saying I'm a midwife for wholeness. You're saying I'm a psychotherapist or I'm a purpose guide or something like that. So yeah, maybe you can help kind of help people understand all these different facets of what the purpose is and then how you get to connect with other people about it.
Yeah. One of the founders of the men's movement, Robert Bly, he introduced this word mythopoetic. So myth is myth, like mythological, not false, but a deep myth, and poetic meaning poetic. And so there is at the core of each human being an additional name, an image, which is drawing you forward into itself. And it's not, my parents named me Jonathan, but Jonathan isn't a mythopoetic identity. But whole person midwife is. There's a teacher of mine I really respect, Bill Plotkin, and he went on a vision quest and he received the name Cocoon Weaver from the vision quest. Now he's a depth psychologist, he's an eco-psychologist, he's a vision quest guide. So that's what it probably says on his business card.
Right.
But what he's really here to do is weave cocoons of transformation wherever he goes. So it's important to see the difference between. Here's a little story. I used to work at Kaiser Permanente it's like a HMO, like a hospital setting, for over 10 years. And they hired me first as a psychotherapist to teach overcoming depression. And unusually I got very high grades. They evaluate you at the end, the students. And then they give me another class, mind-body medicine. And then another class, mindfulness-based stress reduction. And then another class, couples communication. And I kept getting perfect or near perfect reviews. And finally the supervisor said, how do you do that? What's going on? And I don't remember what I actually said to this person because I didn't want to sound, like a new age, fluffy person. But I'll tell you the truth, which is wherever I am, I know what my real work is, which is to midwife wholeness, which is to help people step into the wholeness that is waiting for them. It's as if we live on a little postage stamp swath of the totality of our being. And we want to spread out. We want to live from it. We don't want to die having left, 90% of who we are back.
Right. Well, that's a huge, that's a great point, right? That the calling is related to actually being able to come to the end of your life and look back with, instead of with regret, with actual this gratitude and excitement and, Can you give some other examples of purpose? Because I'm realizing we're talking about yours, but for someone who, is again in a different realm, I'd love to hear some other examples.
Sure. Well, so mythopoetic identity is just one dimension of it. And it's one of the most important, but it's not always the one that appears first. So someone may first be able to access purpose through their vision, through
Uh-huh.
their soul core powers or values, or through their unique transformational process. Like, what's the giveaway? So I can say, oh, I know at the image at the center of my being
Mm-hmm.
is whole person midwife. Well, that's great, but now what do I do?
Yeah.
What's the giveaway? What are the steps through which I give away this process? Well, turns out it has step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. If I'm hired as a purpose guide and teaching a purpose guide course, one of the first things I do is I work with resistance. I work with the sub-personalities
Hmm.
or facets of self that have resistance, because
That people would be resistant to their own purpose.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Because we can say we want something, right? Like at the top of our discussion, I said, well, we want love, and yet there are antibodies to accepting it.
Yeah.
And that seems strange, right? And we want to know our soul's purpose, and yet there are antibodies. Like, what if we found our purpose and we didn't like it? What if we found our purpose and we weren't good at it? What if
When we found our purpose and other people didn't like us anymore, right?
Exactly. So
Mhm.
you could say, using sort of sub-personality psychology, we all have an image consultant. We
Uh-huh.
all want to look good,
Uh-huh.
right? So I admit it, I'd like you to like me and respect me, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
that's the most important thing in our conversation, I will be distracted and not really be able to fall into a true conversation with you.
Right.
Well, that image consultant comes up when we do purpose discovery work. It says, well, if I find, you know, my true identity and then I share it with my spouse or girlfriend or friend, what if they laugh at me? What
Uh-huh.
if they think I'm arrogant and egotistical? What if they think I'm a new agey kind of
Right. What if
person
it's
or whatever?
woo-woo? What if it, right? All
Yeah.
those things.
What if I can't earn any money at it? What if
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be, so it behooves us, before doing soul encounter work, the work that actually helps us discover our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It behooves us to actually work with the facets of self that have skepticism, that
Mm-hmm.
are critical, that are worried about our image, worried about our survival, and not to like run over those voices like speed bumps
Right.
on the way to purpose.
Yeah.
That's an act of aggression, and it will slow down the
The
purpose work.
process. Well, right. And I keep imagining, different men who'd be listening, and one might be someone who's had a really successful career and, done well, and starting to feel that sense of like, oh, life doesn't really have much meaning. Or
Yeah.
there might be some younger men who are just starting out and trying to figure out what direction they're going in, or other men who are, they're like, okay, I'm working, and I didn't realize there was actually, like you said, I didn't realize I could actually do something I love for money, or that could be a part of my life. So
Yeah.
just trying to put it in those terms, and also wondering, um, when you help people find their purpose or their calling, is it something that you always help them integrate into a career or a job, or is it sometimes also, or sometimes instead, more a part of their life in a separate way?
Yeah. So initially, I always advise people, don't quit your day job too quickly,
Uh-huh.
right? Because survival is the first need, right? We
Yeah.
need to pay the rent and be able to eat. So there is a transition period between having your survival dance gig going and knowing your purpose, to having your survival dance gig and your sacred gig be the same thing, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so that's almost inevitable. But over time, if you have authentically found your purpose, this is the very thing you were meant, you were fashioned for to do. It is
Yeah.
your most authentic, organic, indigenous expression of purpose beyond self, of service. And eventually you can and will be paid for it, quite possibly paid well,
Mm-hmm.
versus doing something that isn't quite your thing. You still may be paid really well for doing it, but I just interviewed someone yesterday. They want to take my purpose discovery course. And this person had an MBA from Harvard. And by the end of the phone call, there were tears because although the
Mm.
person was very successful, financially, they realized they weren't living their true expression.
Right.
That it felt like a lack of integrity with soul.
Yeah.
That's why the person came. So great.
Yes.
She's got a good survival dance. Excellent. And now then the next question is, but what is my sacred calling? Where do I really
Yes.
belong?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. So at this moment of pause, I'm just thinking, right, what's most useful for people in this discussion around, all right, now there's a sense of what a purpose is and how one might start to tap into it. I mean, one of the things that you wrote, I think that I resonate with is, and you said this in the beginning, right? Like we're not raised in a very soulful culture here. And I think the soul's voice can be a lot quieter or more subtle, or just when we haven't given it voice all these years, it can be so far in the background. So I'm curious how you help people find that voice. You work with the resistance to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what other ways do you help them
Sure.
find and listen?
The first thing I suggest is to recognize that you're living purposefully already. That in my cosmology, we are, how shall I say? Human beings have stories. We're storytellers. So you are already living some kind of purpose, but it may be a substitute purpose, or what I call a default purpose, right? Which is, get lots of money, have a good relationship. Now, those are wholesome activities. Those are things that we want. But if you think that's the highest and deepest purpose, you can be married, have a kid and a good job, and then still feel something lacking.
Right. Yep.
So there's a lot of default purpose going around, and we live in a soul illiterate culture. That's another thing to know, that if you engage in purpose discovery, you will be developing past where the majority of Homo sapiens are exploring.
Yeah.
And it's fine to
Or
be
not exploring.
Or not exploring, exactly.
Yeah.
And then the last thing to realize is they're competing commitments, that those voices in you might shout you down and say, what don't deal with these sort of so-called spiritual or depth dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Double down on relationship, double down on your current job.
Right.
So it's really important to know that one part of you might feel, ooh, like this, I'm feeling like a quickening. I'm feeling some kind of energy in my body as I listen to this. But there'll be another part that'll say, no, stick with your other commitments.
Yeah.
And I'd say include them all in an integral embrace. Of course you want a
that.
good relationship. Of course you want to take care of your kids if you have them. Of course you want to have abundance and flourish. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But there's also room for these more mysterious depth dimensions.
Yes.
So that would be sort of step one.
I love this because, I was raised in a very East Coast traditional family. Mm-hmm. And my soul path and, enlightenment desires and all of that, it's not really understood or recognized or any of that. So I have a lot of those voices that say, you should just be focusing on stability or survival or making money or buying a house or doing all those things, right? And yet so many people come to me as I'm working with clients and they have all those things like you said, and there's still this ache or this longing or this sense of even feeling like they're dying inside.
Yeah. A house is a good thing, but a house isn't there's not a, once you fill the house-shaped hole in the center of your being, there's still a hole, because
right.
it's
a
not
house
really
is not
about
a
home. House.
Yeah.
It's not your true home. Your home is in your authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And to know what that is necessary to be eligible to live it. If you don't know, it's discovering it. So for instance, if you're with one's sexual orientation, right? When I was a kid, I didn't sit there and look at the different possibilities, gay, straight, bisexual, and then choose. No, that's not how it happened at all. There was a girl in grade 6, I was in 5, and I was like, I discovered the natural attraction I have for women, and hasn't changed. It's immutable, right? And so if I had thought it through, I would have picked bisexuality. Why not? Why leave anybody out?
Right. Why have to cut anyone out?
Yeah. So I was born that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I want to posit this, that you were born with a soul level purpose, like your sexual orientation. And it is for you to discover it and embody it.
Yeah.
And it's there waiting for you. And there are methods or pathways called soul encounter for listening to soul. And it's a little nerve-wracking because you can't work it out with your mind.
Yep.
It's a movement into imagination, not like fantasy, like, I'm going to buy a big yacht. That's not what I mean. I mean like the imagination of a poet, the imagination that sometimes visits us in a dream. You are an imaginal creature. You may not be exercising that capacity enough or adequately to listen to soul, but you can develop it.
Yeah. This is great. I mean, I feel like we are just scratching the surface, and I think this gives men a sense of what you do and what is possible. And, I think this is a good place to let men know where they can find more of you. And then I have a last question for you.
Sure. Purposeguides.org. That's plural, purposeguides.org. And
Great.
depending on when you're listening to this, there's an introductory purpose discovery mini workshop. It's free. It's online on Zoom. And that's happening Wednesday, August 22nd at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. And then I offer them, from time to time. So
Great.
There's a purpose discovery program and a purpose guides training that's starting September 5th of this year.
Great. And who do you find, like, who would come to that class?
It's amazing. I'm interviewing people now. People have to speak with me to make sure it's the right fit for them. I don't want to just have a sign up button and have anyone show up. I want to make sure it's the right thing for them. Wow. It's what a variety of people.
Yeah. I'm just wanting to give people kind of an idea of how would I know if this was me, So
I've got there are sometimes a handful of young millennial types who are rather precocious and they're out ahead of the pack. And they're like, I don't want to toil away like my, father did for 40 years. I want to start with a life of meaning. Is that possible, Jonathan? And I'm like, yeah, it is. And then there are the middle-aged folks, and that's the majority of folks who they've lived some of life, they've accumulated some success perhaps in the world, and they're feeling like, wait a minute, I can sense I'm missing something.
Yes.
Then they're the retirees. They're the people they've worked, and they're a really young 65.
Yep.
And they're like, I might live for another 20 or 30 years. I want to serve. And I want to know what the purpose beyond self is. I've raised my family. I've done my thing. What is in me to serve life? And I don't want to just volunteer at the soup kitchen. I want to do the thing that's unique. Here's a beautiful ending quote. Yeah. Frederick Buechner, he said, find that place where your deepest gladness and the world's hunger meets.
Find that place where your deepest gladness and the world's hunger meets.
Find that place where your deep joy and the world's deep ache meets. That's the place of purpose. Deep soul level purpose, that is.
Yeah.
So loving my wife and loving my son and listening to live jazz is absolutely wholesome and good.
Yes.
But my soul's purpose, to midwife the wholeness of the human beings that come to me, now that brings me alive, brings me incredible joy. If I won the lottery, as I said, I think I would continue to do it. And it seems to be what the world is calling from me.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think you answered my question without me even asking it.
Very good.
Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to ShanaJamesCoaching.com/manalive To get outtakes, videos, and raw footage, I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.